The morning had barely begun when Maya Thompson walked into her 8th grade classroom with the same quiet hope she carried every day that maybe, just maybe, the world would finally stop doubting her. She took her seat in the back, opened her notebook, and tried to ignore the giggles that always followed her down the hallway. For months, the other students mocked her for the same reason. She insisted that her father worked for NASA. Not just worked there, she said, he was training for a future mission, and because Maya didn't dress like money, because she kept to herself. Because she was a quiet black girl in a school that loved loud personalities, no one believed a word she said. It didn't matter that she had drawings of spaceships in her notebook, that she recorded every launch date in the margins of her math homework, or that she sometimes came to school with faint traces of stardust like glitter on her clothes after visiting her father at the training facility. All anyone cared about was that she didn't look like the daughter of an astronaut. And today, that disbelief would grow louder than ever. When Ms. Hawkins, the professor with icy blue glasses and an even icier tone, asked the class to share something interesting about their families for the Career Spotlight Board, kids began bragging. My mom is a CEO, my dad owns 3 dealerships, my uncle is a surgeon. And then Ms. Hawkins' eyes landed on Maya. Maya, she said, dragging out the name like it tasted sour, would you like to pretend again today? A ripple of snickers echoed across the room. Maya swallowed hard, her palms sweating as she stood. It's not pretending, she said softly. My dad works for NASA. He trains. Before she could finish, 3 boys in the front row burst into explosive laughter. NASA, her dad. One shouted, yeah right. Another yelled. Ms. Hawkins didn't silence them. She joined in. She laughed. She actually laughed. Maya, she said, shaking her head, NASA doesn't hire people without advanced degrees, without credentials, without a professional background. And certainly not, she stopped herself, but everyone heard what she meant. Certainly not people like your father. Maya's throat tightened. Her legs wobbled. She felt like the floor dropped from under her. You need to stop lying, Ms. Hawkins continued sharply. Enough with these stories. You're only embarrassing yourself. Maya opened her mouth to explain about the nights her father studied until sunrise, about the years he spent in engineering labs, about the mentors who pushed him into the astronaut program, but the words tangled in her chest. She sat down, slowly, face burning, heart cracking, piece by fragile piece. The boys pointed and mimicked her voice in cruel tones. My dad's an astronaut, they mocked. He flies to the moon every weekend. Maya stared at her desk, wishing she could vanish. She hated how powerless she felt. She hated that no one cared enough to ask questions. She hated that her truth always sounded like fiction in their ears. For the rest of the period, Ms. Hawkins continued teaching, occasionally shooting Maya cold glances as if she were a disruption, simply for existing. When the bell rang, Maya stayed seated, too ashamed to move, too hurt to breathe properly. She didn't even notice that Ms. Hawkins had stepped into the hallway to speak with someone. She didn't see the shadow in the doorway. She only lifted her head when silence fell across the room, silence so heavy it swallowed every whisper. The mocking boys froze mid-lot. Several kids gasped. Ms. Hawkins re-entered, but her face had changed from smug confidence to something that looked like fear, or disbelief. And behind her, stepping fully into the classroom, wearing a full white NASA EVA spacesuit and holding the polished helmet under his arm, was a tall black man whose presence filled the room like a sudden shift in gravity. Maya blinked, her breath catching in her throat. It was her father, Commander Elijah Thompson. The man who had spent years being doubted, tested, pushed, underestimated, and yet never stopped reaching for the stars. The room erupted, but not with laughter this time. Shock AW. Realization. Every sneer dissolved. Every giggle died. Maya didn't know what was happening, but she knew one thing. For the first time in her life, no one was calling her a liar. Commander. Elijah Thompson walked slowly into the classroom, each step of his heavy suit echoing against the tile floor, sounding almost like thunder trembling through the walls. His visor hung under his arm, and the NASA patches on his chest gleamed under the classroom lights like silent medals of truth. Maya felt rooted to her seat, unable to move, her heart pounding as her father, her real, flesh and blood father, who many believed existed only in her imagination, surveyed the room with calm intensity. Miss Hawkins stumbled backward, a strained smile crossing her lips as she tried to regain her authority. Oh, see Commander Thompson. This is unexpected, she stuttered. He cut her off with a polite but firm tone. I heard my daughter was having some issues here at school, he said, eyes flicking briefly toward Maya, filled with quiet reassurance. Maya's heart tightened at the word, daughter. For months she had carried the truth alone, fighting to defend her father's name while he trained tirelessly for missions he couldn't talk about publicly. She had felt invisible, but now here he was, standing like a monument of truth, in front of everyone who doubted her. The room felt suspended in time. The boys who mocked her earlier shrank into their chairs, their faces twisted in regret and disbelief. One whispered, "No way." Another whispered, "Dude, she wasn't lying." Commander Thompson stepped closer to Maya, placed his gloved hand gently on her shoulder, and said loud enough for every student to hear, "I came straight from a simulation to make something very clear. My daughter has nothing to lie about. She tells the truth even when people try to silence her." Ms. Hawkins' cheeks flushed, beet red. "Commander, I assure you no," he said, cutting smoothly through her excuses. "You don't? Assure me. If you don't humiliate my daughter in front of a class and call it teaching." A ripple went through the room. No one had ever spoken to Miss Hawkins like that. She seemed to shrink, tugging nervously at her cardigan. One of the military escorts stepped forward, adding weight to the moment. Commander Thompson continued, "Maya is one of the brightest kids I know. She studies spacecraft systems with me. She can identify every rocket component I work with, and she believed in my dreams long before anyone else did." Maya's eyes began to water. She rarely cried, but this was different. This was justice. This was dignity, returned to her heart. One student finally raised his hand timidly. "Sir, are you really going to space?" Commander Thompson nodded. "Yes, and my daughter will be there on launch day. She earned that." The class stared in awe. Ms. Hawkins swallowed her pride and murmured, "I apologize. I shouldn't have doubted you, Maya." But Maya didn't even need the apology. She just needed the truth to stand taller than the lies of truth.
Now,
Walking across the classroom in a 200-pound suit, before leaving, Commander Thompson knelt beside his daughter. "You okay, baby?" Maya nodded, though tears slipped down anyway. "I am now," she whispered. "Thank you for coming." "Always," he said. "When people doubt you, you look them in the eye and remember who you are. You're my daughter. And that means you're unstoppable." He stood, saluted the stunned students, and walked out with the same commanding presence he entered with. For the first time, Maya walked through that school like she carried her father's constellation with her head high. Pride unshakable, truth shining in every step, and word spread fast. The girl they called a liar became the girl everyone admired. The classroom where she was embarrassed became the classroom where history walked in. And Maya learned that sometimes the universe doesn't need you to explain yourself. Sometimes it sends proof right through the door, wearing a spacesuit. If you loved this powerful story and want more inspiring, emotional, life-changing content, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more true-to-the-heart stories like this to life.